US is strengthening tariffs on Chinese-made EVs, while some say this will not help America's green transition. Plus, an invasive seaweed is causing some trouble at a port on the West Coast. And California wildlife is getting a helping hand crossing the road. How the state plans to assist the animals avoiding traffic. And welcome to EarthX News, where we focus on sustainability, conservation and the environment. I'm Sarah Williamson, in for Christina Thompson. Let's get into some of the biggest headlines facing our planet. President Biden announces his administration is hiking tariffs on $18 billion worth of Chinese imports. The new measures include an increase in the tariff rate on electric vehicles from 25% to 100% this year, along with hikes on tariffs in strategic sectors, including semiconductors, batteries, solar cells, steel and aluminum. Now, the tariffs, which are expected to be phased in over the next 3 years, come amidst growing concern from officials that low-priced Chinese EVs could soon start flooding the US market. President Biden and his aides say the move is an effort to protect American workers against unfair Chinese trade practices. But Colorado's Governor Jared Polis is criticizing the plan, calling the tariffs horrible news for American consumers and a major setback for clean energy. Joining us now to discuss is Mandy Gunasekera, former Chief of Staff to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Mandy, thank you so much for joining us today. How would the influx of cheap Chinese-made EVs be a bad thing as we move into a greener auto industry?
Well, anything manufactured in the United States is done consistent with a gold standard of environmental rules and regulations. We took these very seriously at the Environmental Protection Agency and know how to minimize the effects of byproducts of the industrial process, whether you're making cars or other items, how to control those and to limit air pollutants, water pollutants, and then to protect the safety of the workers. When you allow the infiltration of cheap Chinese goods into the American market, you're incentivizing the manufacture of those goods overseas in places like China, where their standards are not nearly as good as ours. They are not really enforced, and even worse, a lot of the raw materials that go into the batteries for these electric vehicles that are manufactured abroad, they come from minerals that are mined in places where they employ things like child labor. They don't really take into account any impact on the surrounding environment. So if you're looking at the environment from a global perspective, you want things manufactured here in this country and not to incentivize that versus trying to incentivize the development of cheap goods in other countries where they don't comply with the same environmental protections and health protections that we do here.
And Mandy, what's the impact on everyday Americans? How can this help them, or how does it hurt them?
Typically, tariffs don't result in increased costs to consumers. What does is continued inflation driven by poor spending. The tariffs in and of themselves are not necessarily impacting the cost, but protecting U.S. interests.
Officials in Beijing, well, they're vowing to respond to these new U.S. tariffs, though they haven't actually laid out any specifics. There are reports, though, that Chinese EV maker BYD has explored the possibility of opening factories in Mexico. Now, the Biden administration is suggesting the possibility of additional penalties if this does happen. So this seems like an endless game of whack-a-mole. What is the end goal here?
Well, certainly there's going to be some reaction to policies instituted here in the United States that negatively impact China's ability to dump their cheap goods into the American market. That is ultimately what they want, and they've gotten away with that for a really long time. At the end of the day, whether it's tariff policy or energy policy, tariff policy in particular, in this instance, it needs to be a long-term strategy designed to encourage innovation, allow for the reward of that innovation to remain here in this country, and then to ensure that American consumers and workers reap the benefits of that innovation as well and aren't undercut by these cheap Chinese goods that have all sorts of secondary negative impacts.
And just finally, Mandy, I want to ask you about solutions, because environmentalists and economists both have concerns about these tariffs. So what are some of the solutions here?
Well, I think the solution is keeping these tariffs going long term. Let's make sure it's not just a political ploy to try and boost support in some of these key swing states that also happen to be in the Rust Belt area where a lot of this vehicle manufacturing occurs. Let's make sure it's a longer term strategy to ensure that the vehicles we use comply with the standards that we set in this country, which will be better for the environment, better for safety, and produce goods in a much more efficient manner.
Mandy Gunasekara, thank you so much. We appreciate your insight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Microsoft's relentless push to become a world leader in artificial intelligence is jeopardizing one of its other goals: to remove more carbon than it emits by the end of the decade. Now, it was one of the most ambitious and comprehensive plans to tackle climate change when the software giant made the announcement 4 years ago. The company's total planet warming impact is about 30% higher today than it was in 2020. Now, that makes getting to below zero by 2030 even harder than it was when it announced its carbon negative goal. Microsoft's predicament is one of the first concrete examples of how the pursuit of AI is colliding with the efforts to cut emissions. And climate-friendly alternatives to traditional meat sources may be harder to come by in the state of Florida. Leonardo Feldman reports.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is concerned about lab-grown meat. He recently signed a bill banning the sale of such protein in Florida.
It is designed to represent a threat to agriculture as we know it. It is not just about having a product on the market. That's the first step, but they want much more than that, and I think we're snuffing this out at the beginning.
DeSantis' recent action on lab-grown meat comes just a few months after the World Health Organization's director, Dr. Tedros Adhanom, gave remarks on the alleged impact that food systems have on gas emissions.
Transforming food systems is therefore essential. By shifting towards healthier, diversified, and more plant-based diets.
DeSantis also recently signed another bill in the Sunshine State that slashes climate agenda directives. This in an effort to focus on cost efficiency. He stated that the legislation he signed will keep windmills off the state's beaches, put gas in Floridians' tanks, and kick China out of the state. For EarthX, I'm Leonardo Feldman.
Leonardo Feldman, thank you. And in Maine, the Governor's Energy Office is boosting the clean energy sector by launching the Maine Clean Energy Jobs Network. This initiative will direct job seekers to local clean energy employers and training programs. So far, the Governor's Energy Office Job Board currently has close to 30 employers seeking work and more than 270 jobs available. Thousands of acres in Colorado wetlands and miles of streams will be protected despite being left vulnerable by the Supreme Court. After weeks of negotiations, a bipartisan group of state lawmakers will implement a new program overseeing construction, road blocking, and other activities impacting state waters. Environmental advocates say Colorado leads the nation in adopting such regulations, which will replace certain Clean Water Act rules that were wiped out in the Sackett versus EPA Supreme Court ruling. In Colorado and other western states, vast numbers of streams are temporary, flowing only after major rainstorms and during spring runoff season, when the mountain snow melts. And still in Colorado, Colorado Parks and Wildlife officials explained that an angler tipped them off in the presence of the invasive bighead carp in Jack B. Tomlinson Park in Arvada, Colorado last week. 14 bighead carp were found in total, and all of them were hefty. All of the fish were at least 3 feet long, and the heaviest was a whopping 46 pounds. A green-growing invasive seaweed is taking over San Diego's port, causing enough of a problem that the city had to declare a local emergency. Now, the plant, known as killer algae, was first discovered in the South San Diego Bay last September, with more patches popping up in a neighboring bay called Coronado Cays. Now, officials are working to protect the local ecosystem because scientists say the rapidly reproducing invader can quickly take over all of the native habitat if left unchecked. Now, this algae could eradicate native seaweeds and seagrasses like eelgrass, which local fish, birds and green sea turtles rely on for food and shelter. Officials have not confirmed the source of the infestation, but said it was most likely caused by someone emptying a saltwater aquarium into the bay, since the seaweed is a popular and common saltwater aquarium plant. Because of the environmental risk, it is illegal in California to possess, sell or transport the invasive seaweed. Fines can range from $500 to $10,000 for each violation. And California is reportedly building the world's largest wildlife bridge across Highway 101 amid a roadkill epidemic. Now, the 10-lane freeway in Southern California is one of the busiest in the country, cutting through the natural ecosystem, disrupting the movement of animals and threatening their survival. The massive infrastructure project, the Wallace-Annenberg Wildlife Crossing, costs $100 million, funded by a mix of public and private money, and it's expected to open in early 2026. Now, reportedly, 200 people are killed in wildlife vehicle crashes every year, and another 26,000 are injured. And animal collisions cost Americans $10 billion annually. Coming up, an international court ruling may have widespread implications on efforts to curb greenhouse gas emissions. Stay tuned, that story is just ahead on EarthX News. Welcome back. A new report from a climate think tank showing 30% of electricity produced worldwide in 2023 came from renewable sources, including hydropower, solar power and wind power. Hydroelectric dams were the biggest producers across the globe, although droughts in India, China and North America cut into overall energy production. Electricity usage also increased by around 2% globally, with technologies like heat pumps, electric vehicles and electrolyzers driving this new demand. China also accounted for more than half of all new solar power and wind power added globally, whilst also being responsible for over half of all coal generation worldwide. The United Nations issued a warning about the environmental impact of the illegal trafficking of animals. Now, according to the agency's Global Wildlife Crime Report, more than 4,000 species around the world are being targeted, causing an untold harm upon nature. The report found that 40% of all the animals targeted are on the red list of threatened or nearly threatened species, and illegal trade appears to have played a major role in the extinction of numerous rare species. The UN Office on Drugs and Crime report added that the trade, driven by demand for medicine, pets and trophies, is active in more than 80% of countries around the globe. The report concluded that wildlife trafficking persists worldwide despite 2 decades of concerted action at international and national levels. An international court governing the world's oceans is calling on countries to protect marine environments by reducing their greenhouse gases, a move that some legal analysts say could impact the future pledges countries make under the Paris Agreement. Ross Cullen reports.
The oceans and coastlines are some of the world's most beautiful places, but also some of the most fragile. And now a top court says that carbon emissions can be considered a sea pollutant. The International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea is the UN's court for marine and maritime disputes. Its latest ruling is that the emissions from GHGs, or greenhouse gases, that are absorbed by the seas are considered marine pollution.
The Convention and the Paris Agreement are separate agreements with separate sets of obligations. Article 194, paragraph 1, imposes on states a legal obligation to take all necessary measures to prevent, reduce, and control pollution from anthropogenic GHG emissions, including measures to reduce such emissions.
The court also called on the world's most powerful countries to carry more of the burden because small island nations are being disproportionately affected by climate change.
In the context of marine pollution from anthropogenic GHG emissions, states with greater means and capabilities must do more to reduce such emissions than states with less means and capabilities.
The court's opinion is only advisory and non-binding, but the ruling could make waves in future climate cases because experts say it could have far-reaching implications for countries' climate change obligations. For EarthX, I'm Ross Cullen.
Thank you, Ross Cullen. Africa's biggest oil-producing country is launching an eco-friendly initiative. Nigeria's president is gearing up to introduce roughly 3,000 buses and tricycles powered by compressed natural gas, or CNG. The ambitious plan seeks to convert 1 million vehicles to more green energy sources over the next 3 years. Spearheaded by the government, the goal is to provide Nigerians with affordable, safer and environmentally sustainable energy options whilst revolutionising the nation's transportation infrastructure. The effort to make the switch from gas to CNG follows the removal of fuel subsidies, which resulted in a substantial hike in petrol prices. Officials say that by reducing emissions and dependence on traditional fuels, the initiative aligns with global efforts to combat climate change and promote eco-friendly alternatives. Designs for a massive coastal regeneration plan have been unveiled in Dubai. The initiative is called the Dubai Mangroves Project, and it aims to install 100 million new mangroves across more than 40 miles of coastline in the United Arab Emirates. Now, that's enough trees to absorb over 1.2 million metric tons of carbon dioxide a year, or the equivalent of removing 260,000 gas-powered cars from the road. This is according to the project's developer. Now, the project, currently in the design and research stage, aims to enhance Dubai's marine biodiversity and transform the appearance of its coastline and create 10,000 ecotourism jobs. Coming up, a museum in Italy is looking to butterflies in an effort to recreate a known hotspot for biodiversity. Stay tuned, we have more on that story just ahead on EarthX News. An Italian museum has recreated a Tanzanian butterfly forest to raise awareness of biodiversity. Alex Selby reports.
The butterflies fluttering around the greenhouse in Trento, Italy are not native to the town in the Alps, but their survival may depend on it. The project by the Museum of Science, better known as Muse, facilitates their growth into adulthood while attempting to replicate their habitats in southern Tanzania. Climate change and deforestation are threatening their existence, with life cycles, migratory patterns, and mating behaviors all being affected. Scientists behind the butterfly forest hope they can not only facilitate the recovery, but develop long-lasting conservation techniques.
Our aim is that of being able to study better, to understand better what is happening. Therefore, everything that concerns deforestation, social problems linked to the conservation of the environment and the species.
The goal of the project is to not only conserve the butterfly species, but to better understand them, in hopes of sustaining their existence, while raising public awareness by showing off their natural beauty. The Udzungwa National Park in Tanzania is home to more than 2,500 plant species, 120 mammals, thousands of invertebrate species, and more than 40 types of butterflies. Researchers at Muse say changing current farming policies and limiting human contact is necessary for their survival. Butterflies provide critical benefits to their environment as pollinators, allowing plants to reproduce and food supplies to flourish. And, likely to their dissatisfaction, they're oftentimes food for birds and other animals, meaning without them, their environments and the planet could look dramatically different. For EarthX, I'm Alex Selby.
Alex Selby, thank you. Now, caught on camera, a rare subspecies of leopard has been spotted in its natural habitat in China. Infrared cameras recently captured video of the North China leopard reappearing in their traditional mountainous terrain near Beijing, according to officials at a national nature reserve in the region. The species, also known as the Chinese leopard, is classified as a national first-class protected animal in China. Scientists say that deforestation and rampant illegal hunting led to a sharp decrease in their numbers in the second half of the 20th century. But the recent sighting is a sign that leopard populations are growing. Recent data finds the subspecies number between 600 to 700, and that's a dramatic increase from a previous census that estimated their population to be fewer than 400. And before we leave you, a 6-year-old sloth makes her debut at the Oregon Zoo. Zoo officials say that Berry, a Lyne's two-toed sloth, is quickly settling into her new habitat in the rainforest area after recently arriving from a wildlife facility on the East Coast. Two-toed sloths are considered a species of least concern by the International Union of Conservation of Nature, but their numbers are in decline. Berry's move to Portland was recommended by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums Species Survival Plan, an organization among zoos to promote self-sustaining populations. And that's it for this edition of EarthX News. Please join us again next week. I'm Sarah Williamson.